Good morning, everybody. My name is John Dixon. I am honored to welcome a distinguished panel of boating experts. I'm looking forward very much to the wisdom that can be gleaned from the group assembled both in here and in the crowd. As I was sort of looking forward to today, I was thinking of a few different themes that we might touch on as we go. The presence of sailboats versus motorboats versus paddle sports on Pleasant Bay. And then when it comes to boating safety, the presence of single vessel incidents versus multi-vessel incidents. And then the consequences of those, injury, boat damage, and environmental harm. So of course, our goal today is to try and come up with ideas that can improve boating safety for all of the constituents that use Pleasant Bay. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and let me start with John at the end. So if everyone can hear, I'll just let them speak, but there also is a microphone that we can pass around. I don't know which way you want to. Do you want to pass the microphone down? You can start that down, John. Can't hurt to be a little bit amplified.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. John Rendon, Harbormaster in Harwich. I'm prior Coast Guard. Spent 25 years in the Coast Guard, and I retired in 2008. And ended up working for this guy next to me for a few years as his deputy. So if I have any faults as a harbor master, he's the one that broke me in. So put the blame on Stuart. I've been in Harwich since 2012 when I took over for Tom Leach over there, who was there for many years. So love the job, love the people. Love what I do, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Stuart Smith. I'm the Harbormaster here in Chatham. I started this position with the department in 1988. Been here a little while, and I'm anxious to hear about today's forum and any questions you folks might have. Thanks.
Good morning, folks. My name is Nathan Sears. I'm the Natural Resources Manager for the town of Orleans. In my department, I manage the Harbor Masters, which is including 1,300 moorings approximately in town, Rock Harbor, waterways enforcement, the maintenance of the landings, the public beaches, including the Oversand Vehicle Program, in the shellfish resources. I've been working for the town since 2005. I started with Paul Fulcher at the Parks and Beach Department at the time. In 2014, I took over as the Natural Resources Manager, replaced Dawson Farber, who is now the Harbor Master in the town of Dennis. I appreciate, honored to be on the panel this morning.
Yes, as well, honored to be here. I'm Tony Davis, owner of Arey's Pond Boatyard. It's kind of the beginning of the boatyard owners on Pleasant Bay. Arey's Pond, I'm going into my 30th season as owner with my family of the boatyard. I'm the third owner. It was established in 1954 as a sailing repair yard at the time. We were at the boatyard actually at the time under Jim Kidd was a dealership for wooden beetle cats and a repair center, as well as the other helping out with the sailboats at the camps. And the second owners, Brad and Libby Fisk, owned the boatyard for 25 years and turned it into a very powerful O'Day sailboat dealership and Tohatsu outboard. And I took over in 1990, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but slowly figured it out, and we're kind of custom boat builders and focus completely on sail.
Hi, my name's Alan Cohen. I'm the owner of Ryder's Boatyard. I've been running the marinas since 1994. Grew up on the other end of the Cape in Falmouth. Been boating since I was a little kid, and attended and graduated the Maritime Academy. Got a real job for a while, and decided I didn't like engineering, so I was lucky enough to find a marina down here on the Cape and moved back to the Cape, and been having fun ever since. And anxious to hear what everybody has to say, both up here and out there. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Todd Walker. I'm one of the owners of Nauset Marine. We have two locations in Orleans. One is the marina down on Meeting House Pond on Pleasant Bay. And I've been boating on the bay since I was pretty young, so lots of experience, mostly with power boats.
Good morning, I'm Janet Williams. I'm sitting in today for Sarah Griscom, who has a family emergency to deal with. And I guess I'm here partly because I'm a member of the board of directors of PBCB and have been since 2017. I'm also wearing the hat as a member of the Chatham Conservation Commission, so I'm bringing a little bit of a different perspective to what boating safety and doing no harm in Pleasant Bay means. So, but it's all connected. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Leach. I'm the Waterfront Director at Pleasant Bay Community Boating. I took over from Greg Kelly in 3 years ago, so going on to season 4 for me. Had a sailboat and a powerboat in Round Cove since 1971, so I've spent a lot of time on Pleasant Bay and all the nooks and crannies, and had a lot of interesting times out there in the bay. So great to be here, and I want to thank my Harbormasters down there, as a retired Harbormaster, for showing up today, and this should, hopefully we'll see what happens here. Good luck, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. I'd have you pass that down, because I'm going to start at the far end in my questions. We're just going to do a couple of questions for the panel, and then we're going to open up to all of you for questions from the floor. But I'm going to start with the Harbormasters, and I'm going to ask them what are the most frequent problems you encounter in the issue of boating safety, and maybe some ideas that come from those about how we can encourage better boating operations. So I'll start with you, John.
Okay, thanks. I guess I would say, from a boating safety perspective, what I see the most that is problematic is dealing with speed. Safe speed. I mean, that's one of the core elements of our NAV rules that we're all supposed to be familiar with and comply with. And if there's any issue that I see that is problematic on a regular basis, is people going too fast. And that's often coupled with people who aren't paying attention. And those two combinations, I think, is a bad mix. So, do we see alcohol? Alcohol obviously can be problematic. I know it's out there. I personally haven't dealt with a whole lot of BWI cases in Harwich, and that's a real positive thing. But as we go about doing our patrols throughout the summers, that's certainly something that we pay attention to. And I think, if you look at the statistics that the Coast Guard provides, and a lot of the fatalities and a lot of accidents that we have, clearly alcohol is one of the major causes of that. So I'll pass it on to Steve.
Good morning. I guess what I've seen from a boating safety perspective issue in Chatham specifically is weather. A lot of people get into difficulty regarding when it comes to fog. The fog in Chatham comes and goes throughout the day, frequently throughout the summer. And people, at least some people, are generally unprepared for that, or not fully prepared. So weather is and certainly fog is one of them. We have, of course, you all are familiar with our two inlets on the east side of Chatham, and we have, frequently hazardous conditions there, all relating usually to weather. We have a storm offshore, and it's, the winds may be calm, but people aren't familiar that there may be some weather offshore kicking up wave and surf conditions on both the Chatham inlets. And we've had to respond to quite a few cases where people are just not in tune with that. So weather generally is an issue for us here. The second thing that I've seen an increase in, and I think we all have up here, is the frequency of small recreational crafts such as kayaks and canoes and things of that nature, those water sports type vessels. We're frequently responding to cases of people who find themselves in conditions that they weren't in tune with. Maybe it's the current, having trouble, rowing against it. Maybe they've gone off, in the afternoon and night has come and they kind of lose their perspective as to where they are. So, we highly encourage people to wear life jackets. I know that's kind of an old, people hear that all the time, like wearing your seatbelt, but it's so important. The life jackets have become a lot easier to wear with the inflatable types. They are required on those types of craft between September 15th and June 15th. So in the summer they're not required, but highly recommended. It's an easy thing to wear, and it can keep you out of trouble. And carry a whistle and a phone and a handheld radio. And I would encourage everybody who has a phone, who gets underway on the Cape and Islands, to put the Coast Guard phone number into their phone. That phone number is 508-457-3211. It should be in everybody's phone. That will connect you to the command center where John worked. He was in the Coast Guard in Woods Hole, and they run search and rescue and all their other cases from that command center for the Cape and Islands region. So that's an important phone number to have. 911 is good. This one's better. Gets you right to those folks who are going to start the process of getting people to your location. So small craft and weather would be two subjects that I think I see a lot of people getting difficulty with. Thank you.
I'd like to say, in general, overall, these protected inland estuaries are generally a safe place to boat. That's one of the reasons why we see the flocks of small vessels during the summer months come to places like Pleasant Bay. Anything from kayaks to small power skiffs, small sailboats, stand-up paddle boards, you name it nowadays. What happens is we get the perfect storm of a convergence of user groups. And I think it's really a key piece to this is to educate those small vessels that not everybody in the estuaries are at their destination. I relate it to boating channel being like a highway. Some of these vessels are tens of miles away from their destination, often accessing the Atlantic Ocean through the inlets that are tidally restricted. And they're transiting through our area. They are restricted with their maneuverability to the deeper water of the channel. And in most cases, we're trying to expedite their travel to and from because they're going long distances. Certainly we have no wake zones in place for safety reasons, and we review those from time to time at committee level with waterways committees, as well as the Harbormaster Department, always looking for input from the public. But the smaller vessels need to understand that, I relate it to the highway. If you had bicycles and mopeds riding alongside the highway with the vehicles and weaving in and out of the highway, well, you can imagine the frustration and the dangerous, precarious situations that would put everybody in. I recommend to the small craft vessels that don't require the depth of the channel to avoid the channel. And if they do need to cross the channel at a 90-degree angle, find a spot in the channel where it's narrowest so they can get across as fast as possible, and do that at a time when there's no vessels coming and going. If you're in a power boat, speed is an issue, right? You need to abide by the no wake zones, but more importantly, when you're in small bodies of water like this, where they're often congested with all these different user groups, you just need to be courteous, right? This is common sense, be courteous. If you're approaching another vessel, in the state of Massachusetts, you're not required to have a license to operate a boat, so you should never assume the mindset of another boater. So power down, figure out their intentions, play it safe. Regardless of your interpretation of right of way, we always see people, screaming the right of way. Well, play it safe, right? Not everybody out there might not be educated to the point that you are. Education is a key piece. We do our best through the department to educate these boaters. We have information. Reach out to your Harbormaster departments. We can provide information on paddling, the etiquette of paddling, boating basics. I think it's a no-brainer that the state of Massachusetts doesn't require, but offers these boating safety classes. We can provide you with the next local class so that you can attend it. Until that is required in the state of Massachusetts, it's going to be the responsibility of these boaters to be responsible to take these classes and understand what they're getting themselves into. Have a float plan, like Stu mentioned. Look at the weather. Bring a phone. Boat defensively. Understand the layout of your water body, where you're going, where the boating channel is. Tell people where you're going. Like I said, reach out to your harbor masters. We're here for you. If you have any questions, if you have young children that are going offshore, we can set you up to succeed and be safe. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we'll pass to the Boatyard owners at this point. I'm going to ask a similar question. With your clients, with your customers, what are the most frequent problems you encounter? And how do you present boating safety to them as a way to try and minimize those potential problems? Tell me.
Yeah, sure, I'd address that. But first I just want to, sometimes I think I have a hard job. These harbor masters really have, during the season, have the toughest job of anyone trying to manage these waters. And I just want to, if I didn't get a chance, to thank all three of these guys for the work they do. It's incredible what they have to deal with day to day, especially when the weather comes in. So what we do at Arey's Pond Boatyard every spring, I was trying to figure out how long we've been doing it, but it's been at least over 20 years. We have what we call a spring seminar. This year it's April 24th, or the weekend of the 24th, might be the 23rd is the Saturday. It's always a Saturday morning event, and we have it indoors, sometimes outdoors. And what we discuss right off the bat is boating safety. And we do it principally, we gather most of our newer mooring customers in the pond who aren't familiar with how the boatyard operates and how it goes on Pleasant Bay and places to go in your sailboat. Please understand, I'm talking just about sailing here, okay? People who own sailboats. So basically what we do is just talked about here with the harbor masters. We discuss float plan, we discuss weather, and all the safety gear. We have the manuals there for people to pick up and make sure that their boats are outfitted based on their size with all the safety gear that's required. Won't go into all that now today, but if you have questions, obviously we're here to answer those on the gear. The phone, we get a lot of back and forth. It's as similar as the setup we have here about phone. We're not 7 days a week to answer, so sometimes we call these guys next to me, if they're in trouble. and because they run a 7-day-a-week program, if it's not a real emergency where it's got to be to the Harbormaster. So we go over all those details. The last 2 seasons, we've been specifically addressing what's been going on at Simpson Island. Also, I just want to reiterate, my customers strictly are Pleasant Bay. We rarely have customers who venture beyond Minister's Point. So what I'm talking about is Big Pleasant Bay, full tide, all the estuaries, and Big Bay and Little Bay. So we talk about places to go, and this, like I said, last 2 seasons we've been talking about Simpson Island, what's been going on there, how to safely get on and off the island, how to appreciate it, be environmentally friendly. And then because of all the activity now at the Narrows, we really stress what's going on at the Narrows and how to get through the Narrows. This is a restricted channel, okay? So port to port, regardless, there's no right-of-way rules when you're under sail. So you've got to, if there's a power boat coming slowly in a no wait, you've got to tack off and give room. You don't just sail in front and yell, "I have right of way," because you actually don't. So we go through all of that, and if you have an outboard on your sailboat, it should be ready to use if it's really crowded. On a holiday week, you should be prepared to turn your outboard on and just luff into the wind and motor through, and to give right of way to all the boats. So we really are, in fact, port to port, going through the Narrows is critical. And I'm just going to drop this bomb right now. I think that it should be considered that the point between Namaquoy Point and Oldfield Point should be considered at some point as a restricted channel, because what's going on there is very, very similar to what's going on at the Narrows, where you've got all sorts of vessels, paddle boarders, kayakers, sailors, and powerboats all making that turn one way or the other into Namaquoy River, into the river, and this is a very stressful point when people are trying to make decisions of which way to go. So I really, really think it should be a no-wake zone and a place that's essentially a restricted channel. At low tide, I think by definition it is, because of the distance between the land or the shallow waters. But so that's what we do. We do a seminar, educate people, and we have a sailing school and with private lessons, and a lot of those lessons are for people who are new to Pleasant Bay. So they may know how to sail their boat well, but they need a lesson on where to go at the different tides and places to anchor and go for a swim and things like that. So we'll send an instructor out and go through all of that. We'll sail through the Narrows, down to Aquasit Inn, up to CYC, maybe depending on the tide, to Strong Island, and then back to Arey's Pond, kind of explaining all the things you can and can't do in Pleasant Bay.
We have a variety we're mostly power boats. We have a variety of from like 13-foot boats up to 37-foot. So we have people that are just going in the bay, some that are leaving in the Cove, as well as some going, 50 miles offshore fishing for tuna. We also have now seeing our beginnings of our 3rd generation of family boaters since I've been there. So a lot of the customers that have been there have been grow up boating, and they have a lot of experience. They know how to get around. Mostly I see with them when things get tougher when you're in a close quarters maneuvering situation, like coming into the dock. We have a staff of dock hands that their goal is to make everybody look good as they come in. They don't bang up their boat, they don't bang up the dock, they don't start yelling at other family members. But we do have new customers coming in, and typically what we'll do with them when somebody comes in, if we could go out for a ride with them, show them different areas. There's a great guy by the name of Kelly Zimmerman that does boat training, that if people want it more extensive, we refer them to him. And he takes people out for lessons for whatever they need. But we do help them. I mean, one of the things I try to make sure with people too is that when you go out, you have to be prepared for what you don't expect to happen. You can't just have your anchored road just thrown about on the deck or your dock lines and then expect your engine dies and then you throw out the anchor because the current's strong and it's all fouled. So we try to teach them to be prepared for everything. And then just situational awareness, slowing down when you see another boat, a boat under tow or a kayak, or just somebody fiddling around on their boat and they're mooring. You know, drop down to a no wake speed, and we try to enforce all those type of rules.
Well, we have two types of boaters typically. New boat buyers, we have many of those right now. People who are new to boating for the first time. And then we have our existing customer base who are typically quite experienced. So we don't have to worry too much about those experienced long-time boaters. As far as boating safety with our new boat buyers, and again, we have many of them. When anyone buys a new boat from us and we want to deliver it to them, we take them out on a orientation or a show and tell, as we call it. So the new buyer will get between a 2 and a 4 hour orientation with the customer. The customer will get an orientation with one of our captains. They'll take them out and they'll show them how to operate the boat. They'll show them about all the different aspects of the vessel, all of the features and all that stuff, but they'll also spend a lot of time with them talking about safety and rules of the road and right and wrong and how to operate. And so we can determine pretty quickly, our guys can determine when they first meet these folks and they put the boat in the water and they head off, whether the guy has done this before, you know, is he an existing boater or has he been with someone else who has a boat? Does he really have any idea whatsoever what he's doing, or is he really green? And typically that depends on the length of that orientation this customer is going to get. And then during that time, if they're a new boater and they're needing more assistance, we'll always offer to let them set another appointment at a separate time for another 4 hour orientation. So really, from again a boating safety point, the new boat people do get that opportunity to have someone one-on-one with them to show them how to operate and navigate and all that stuff. And again, if it's in Pleasant Bay, then they take them out and they take them all out through the bay all the way down to down to Chatham and back typically, and let them get educated as to where they're going. So, thank you.
Janet, we'll keep our progressive flow. Yeah. Janet, you can pick which hat you want to wear to contribute to respond to our other panelists, but maybe to talk about no wake zones and issues like that. About talk a little bit about the environmental impact and some of the ideas that we should be thinking about, and not just in terms of people coming home with their boat, but ways of not damaging the estuary as they boat.
Absolutely. I wear multiple hats and I'm comfortable doing it. So, because I am a boater, powerboat, sail, paddle. I've done all of those in around Pleasant Bay for quite a few years. But I'm also here to suggest that the term boating safety is broader than just the physical well-being of the people on the boats and the boats themselves, and protecting them against any harm. From PBCB's point of view, boating safety encompasses the well-being of the bay itself as an ecosystem and all of its various components. I'll remind you that the third leg of PBCB's mission is environmental stewardship. And so we view it as a critical part of what boating safety and the obligation of everybody who's using the Pleasant Bay system is to protect it and not to do any harm. And so remember that Pleasant Bay, the system, has been designated by the state as an area of critical environmental concern. And that's for two reasons. One is that the ecosystem and its components are incredibly important. Pleasant Bay is surrounded by 1,100 acres of eelgrass beds, shellfish beds, and salt marshes. And each of those play a very important role, not only in maintaining the health of the system, because the eelgrass beds act as nurseries for spawning and for juvenile finfish and shellfish to grow, but also because the salt marshes and eelgrass beds play a really important part in protecting the upland areas against storm damage and flood damage by attenuating wave energy, by storing excess water, by storing carbon. I mean, a salt marsh can store and sequester 50 times more carbon than a forest does. So they are the world's leading carbon storage components, and frankly, our whole future and well-being depends on the health and the sustainability of all of these systems. So PBCB sees this as a really important part of boating. What does that mean? I don't think it means anything particularly different from what everybody's been saying already, which is two parts. Be aware of where you are, understand where these systems are in the bay, see where the eelgrass beds lie. It's shallow enough in most parts of the bay that you can see them. See where the salt marshes are, and then not only just know where you are, but exercising due care and not doing any harm. There's lots of examples of that. It's really, it is mostly common sense. Don't drag an anchor through the eelgrass beds. Don't drag a kayak through the salt marsh. These individual acts which seem pretty harmless by themselves. If you think about it in terms of over time during a busy summer season with multiple people doing these acts over and over, these resource areas can really be damaged. And so it's part of boating safety to understand everybody's obligation to exercise care and caution and protect the well-being of the bay itself. So we see it just a little bit broader than what we've been talking about, but it's not really different in essence.
All right, thank you. And Tom, you have also multiple hats. Can offer some expertise as a retired Harbormaster, as well as the view of how Pleasant Bay Community Boating approaches the issue of safety with our clientele.
Yes. Well, to lead off on what Janet said, environmental safety and stewardship are a big part of what we do at Pleasant Bay Boating. We basically run a summer camp at Pleasant Bay Boating for more than 250 families put their kids in our program one way or another. So it is quite a big program. And since Cape Cod Sea Camps went out of business this past year, and with COVID restrictions, we have been under even more pressure to satisfy the needs of many more families than we once did. So our program is we're jamming it till it gills, literally, to keep ourselves going down there. Our summer staff includes roughly 20 college-age kids that come to us. Really, we go out, we hire the brightest and the best that we can find. They are basically our faculty to student ratio. The kids that are in the boats that you see out there on the bay is basically about 3 to 1. So they're really getting one-on-one boating safety every day. The lecturing starts around the 9 o'clock when they arrive till almost when mom and dad come to pick them up in our parking lot. So we are very much tuned in on boating safety. And having said that, there's the chart behind me of Pleasant Bay. I'm just going to zoom it in here a little bit for you. I hope this helps, having this chart to look at, because we can go visit all these at different nooks and crannies. Anyhow, we're familiar with where Pleasant Bay boating is. Put my cursor right on it, about there, right where that rock is. So we actually have competing interests in the bay that we see. Good interests, all good interests. Wequassin has a rental fleet of boats that is running out from Chris's operation over there. They also have a shuttle boat that runs the bay practically every hour and a half. We see the Wequassin boat scooting over to North Beach somewhere to drop their hotel guests off to visit and enjoy the outer beach, or as we call it, North Beach Island today, and then returning through the busy waterway. We have the Chatham Yacht Club, which has been there since 1933. 1921.
We just had our centennial.
Sorry, 1921. Take that back. But a very vibrant group of sailors sailing beetle cats and day sailors and other vessels over there. And they also hold their big regatta. Tony Davis has his big catboat event that comes off every year. That's an amazing thing. For 250 sailors show up now for catboating. And we have, of course, Pleasant Bay Community Boating, where we have roughly as many as 80 boats potentially could fill the bay from just flowing from us between our board boats, our lasers, our Optimus prams, and sunfish sailors that go out, and also a dozen Flying Scots and 8 maybe catboats now, eight Marshall 15 sized boats sailing in the bay. So a lot of activity. The Big Bay, as Waterfront Director, we're always trying to get it registered in people's minds. Please, Big Bay is deep water. I'm the guy that has to repair the boats when they get damaged, when they run aground, when they go skidding over some shallow bars in the bay, notably Dogfish Bar, this one right here, like we call Dogfish Bar. It's got a lot of gravel, and there's a lot of gravel over here near Simpson Island area. Of course, these Flying Scots come back. They have a very expensive centerboard lead covered by fiberglass, and literally every one of our boats we've had to repair what they call splayed centerboards, where they've been literally using them as their depth sounder to crash across these bars, and they get flared out, and it's a big process to repair them, and timed like death on. We're not going near these shallow area people, right? Stay in Big Bay. Big Bay is 508 acres of great deep water, and so I'm always lecturing my minions about where they should be, right? Pretty obvious. All that said, it doesn't always work like that. And usually what happens is because of the southwest wind, and most people get in a sailboat, and the idea of sailing upwind, in other words, from Pleasant Bay boating towards head of the bay, what I call head of the bay, which is up here near Jackknife Harbor. The idea of going upwind is not always appealing to a lot of sailors, especially a lot of young people, right? They'd rather just sail like what we call free sailing, just sail wherever they. So these are our island, Simpson Island, Little Simpson Island, Strong Island. Those are very tempting little destinations out there. They look so interesting, don't they? Are there pirates out there? What's going on over there, right? So off they go, and of course, where are they crossing? I used to run Blue Claw Tour with Rob Weissman's operation. They're a really good operation up and down the bay. We take people out to look at the seals primarily, but to actually get a harbor tour of Chatham Harbor. and Little Pleasant Bay. And so we're always coming through the Narrows, following the channel down from the Narrows. I'm just trying to get the conversation started here, but you run that slow speed down past what we call Rooster Rock, where Nate has the channel. There's Rooster Rock down about there, and then we would turn and enter into the deep water of the bay in that northeast corner, and then run the channel markers down and past Dogfish Bar off that direction. But anyhow, when you have as many as 10 sailboats perhaps from Pleasant Bay boating with kids and young instructors sailing across that channel, that's what we don't want to have. We don't want to put them in that traffic zone. They can think about that, but they don't always think about it. In fact, it's kind of like it becomes a daily process of of trying to educate, not educate, but trying to explain why we're going the other direction. So you of course we do organized sailing. That's much better for us, where we're sailing on a generally a race course situation, or we create some kind of a treasure hunt around the bay with sailboats or that kind of. I'm sure Greg did the same thing on his tour at PBCB. But anyway, it gives them an organized and a destination that can be away from that channel area. So we try to do that. But I guess what I'm trying to say though, we know there's a lot of sailing traffic that's crisscrossing in that busy channel area. And we also know that, I've been a Harbormaster for years and years, and watched how boats everywhere have grown from small mom and pop boats to, like, now we're reaching the point where I go down to Saquatucket Harbor, I don't recognize it, John. It's there are huge outboards there that have as many as 4 outboards on the stern, right? And I know we're seeing that even multiple engine boats at all of our boatyards, right? I mean, it's the culture that is kind of going. There was a time at Saquatucket Harbor where there were 70 sailboats and 70 cruising sailboats at Saquatucket Harbor. You go down, you can count 70 masts. Culturally, the whole thing has shifted. People have gone, either families have gotten away from sailing, or gotten rid of the sailboat, bought the big powerboat they thought they could use more. And you go down to a busy place like Saquatucket, and you might count 10 masts now, and the same thing happened in Witchmere Harbor and around Cove. Powerboating is, I think it's, as Americans, it's like, how much time do we really have to spend boating? So if I don't have a lot of time,
Better be in a hurry.
I gotta go with my hair on fire. So we have competing interests in the bay. We also have people water skiing, wakeboarding. The windsurfing generation has become kiters. Kiters are now doing this thing they're holding this board. I see Jerry out there every day cruising across the bay, but that thing's going to explode on that. I don't even know what you call it, but it's got it's a board that has a lifter on it, and off he goes. Foiler, yeah. Right? Foiling, right? And so a lot of competing interests, anyhow.
Excellent. I'm gonna pick up on a couple things that you guys talked about. Then I'll give you a little warning. That one more question to go through the panel, and then we'll open up to the group. And the question's going to be: I want you to tell me one horror story and one thing you learned from it. See, you might like this. Some good horror stories could be entertaining, and what we should learn from your particular chosen horror story. Tom mentioned the closing of Cape Cod sea camps, and I want to recall for you a time when I was a kid, and when many of us were young, the bay on a given day could have had 150 sailboats in it from all the camps. There were, a dozen or so camps around the bay, all of which were sailing, whether it was Avalon or Namaquoit or Pleasant Bay Camp, or I don't want to try and be exhaustive with my list because I'm going to miss a bunch. But it was full. The bay would just get jammed full of sailboats from all these camps, and it was great. I just remember being out there, and it was. I mean, I guess when I was a kid and trying to have my little beetle cat race, I'd get annoyed because not all of them would get out of my way. But it was wonderful to be part of this community that was just filling the bay with sail. And that's one thing that motivated us when we started Pleasant Bay Community Boating. Is those camps have all gone away. And so where are the opportunities for kids to grow up boating and sailing? And so that's what it's what we started with. The idea is that we had to believe there's some demand out there, there's a need out there, and we want to try and meet that. That idea of the bay, the more full the bay is, the better in my mind. But of course, then the more times boats are encountering each other, and potential problems arise. So with that, why don't let me pass the mic down to John and do the same flow, and see if we get some good stories out of this group about something and what we can learn from it.
Okay, thanks. I guess one that comes to my mind happened last year. We had two young adults, college-age kids, jump on a jet ski. They launched off a private home there in Harwich. And they just took off, didn't tell the family where they were going. The parents thought they were just going out for a cruise. They ended up going all the way to the tip of Monomoy. And they beached the jet ski, went, running around, having a good time. And the tide went out, couldn't get the jet ski off. And they didn't have any communication, no cell phone, no nothing. They didn't want to get their cell phone wet. And they couldn't get the jet ski off. Night came, not only night, but thick fog came. And of course, nobody knew where they were. They were missing. So the parents called, and obviously I got underway. Stu and his crew got underway. The Coast Guard got underway. At night, thick fog, looking for a jet ski, which, as you know, trying to find a jet ski in fog at night is next to impossible. And we scoured the area as best as we could. And fortunately, one of the members, they came across somebody who did have a cell phone. So they were able to call the parents and say, we're stuck out here. This is where we're at. We're going to try to make it back. And they did. They left in thick fog, not really knowing where they were. And it could have been a really, really bad situation. I mean, they had nothing. They couldn't see the hand in front of your face, and Stu will attest to that. It was thick. And so they left, and they tried to follow the shoreline, and fortunately they ended up on a beach in Chatham. A guy who was walking the beach called me and said, "Hey, just came upon this jet ski with two people, thought you should know." And of course we had our blue lights and everybody was out there searching for them, and they made it. All right, fortunately it wasn't a horrible tragic ending, but it certainly could have. So in this particular case, no communication, didn't tell the parents where they were going, so nobody knew where they were at. Weather, again, as Stu talked about, became a huge issue for us. And, they were awful cold, they were wet, they were in rough shape, but they were alive. So that was a tough one. And, those kinds of things, just really, it brings home the importance of a lot of these things that we've talked about with regard to, equipment, telling people where you're going, watching the weather, all these things, you know, a fun day out cruising around can turn tragic. And, you know, fortunately, I would say, you know, we take kind of a regional approach on how we do business at the harbor. And we work hand in hand with Chatham and Dennis. And, you know, in those kinds of scenarios, we've had several of them where we're all out there searching. And it's, you know, we do the best we can with the resources that we have. In that particular case, it was, you know, it was a good ending, fortunately. So.
I have a lot of horror stories. I'm not really sure where to begin. Some of them are political too. So
Some of them have nothing to do with boating.
right, exactly. I have a whole stack of kind of the boating or paddle smart pamphlets that people are welcome to after the meeting. But I'll kind of follow up on what I had mentioned earlier with canoes and kayaks, because they are the largest area of increase we see where people are getting into difficulty and frequent unnecessary fatalities. Tom Leach will recall, you know, a number of years ago, we had 2 young ladies leave Bank Street in Harwich, and the ending was not good. They both perished. One individual, the Coast Guard found with a cutter offshore between Monomoy and Nantucket. The other person we never found. And there's just a few things that would have made the difference. One of which, I'll just give you a brief scenario of this scenario. You know, 2 young ladies, they're in their 20s. I think they were at the beach with their boyfriends. And they left in their kayaks late in the day. It was, Tom can help me, but I think it was October. And never to be seen again. Now, the fog came in, it was foggy, but it got even more foggy. And night settled and made the conditions for searching for these 2, you know, you won't say impossible, but very, very challenging. And there's just a few things that made a huge difference. One is wearing a life jacket. You know, these 2 girls would still be with us today. Having a piece of communication, whether it be a phone or a handheld VHF radio, and a whistle. Now, we, I think it was spearheaded by Tom, frankly, filed legislation with the state to have a few requirements. I think it was a whistle, a compass, and maybe it was wearing a life jacket. But I remember the whistle and compass.
Yeah, it was life jacket. Wear a life jacket.
Wear a life jacket. And that got to hearings up in Boston where we testified before the legislature. One of the legislatures asked, well, the compass is nice, but what am I going to do with it? So I thought, well, we're really starting from the very beginning here. So we explained that whole dissertation. They never passed the legislation, which I think is tragic. So that's a horror story that can be relatively easy to avoid. The other thing I might mention is, and some of the other folks down the end of the table here to my right might know the terminology better, but because I don't kayak. But there are kayaks, and these 2 young ladies had 2 kayaks. We found them tied together off of Monomoy several days later. They're the type of kayak that are plastic hard shell kayak, and you sit inside of them. These 2 had 0 flotation, and the ones I'm familiar with don't have any flotation. They're not the ocean kayaks that I see that are buoyant, you can hang on to, you can get up on, lay yourself down on. They're suicidal. They should be banned from saltwater environments entirely. They just should not be used here. So, you know, if you have those, trade them in for your kids or grandchildren, and get the ocean kayaks and get them a few basic safety equipment, and I'll tell you, they'll be a whole lot better off. Thank you.
I have a couple stories. Both of them have happy endings.
Thanks.
Yeah. One of the most common things we deal with, which has the easiest fix, and I know that these two gentlemen can attest to it, is that if we find a kayak or a vessel overturned in the water and we don't have any identification associated with it, then we have to assume that there's a person in the water. And the amount of time, resources, money that's put forward in these incidents, helicopters from the Coast Guard looking for a possible person in the water throughout the day into the night, to find out hours, 12 hours later that Sonny Boy left it on the beach, and he went to the movie theater and took a nap afterwards. Yet the whole region has been looking for this person. It's as easy as putting a sticker on or taking a Sharpie magic marker and writing your name and your phone number, whether it be a kite board, a stand-up paddle board, whatever, gizmo, hydrofoil, small vessel. Some type of identification saves our departments incredible amounts of money, time, and valuable, things that we could be doing otherwise to enforce safety on the waters. Another story, when we talk about float plans, making sure you're prepared and understanding the tide. The department got a call from an elderly woman that her husband was overdue, and he had been out in a day sailor in Pleasant Bay. My staff went out to do a grid search in the bay. It was late afternoon. It was low tide. We couldn't get to certain places. We were limited by the depth, but we were trimmed up as far as we could, and we were going behind the islands, looking at every nook and cranny. Well, we finally came across the gentleman. He probably was 80 years old. He was stuck in the mud up to his waist. The tide was coming in. His sailboat was up in the marsh behind the Nauset barrier beach, and he was attempting to make it to the island. But he was stuck in that mud and absolutely exhausted. He needed water. We barely could make out the fact that he was even where he was, just barely saw his hand above the marsh. So I think certainly he would have perished. But it was as easy as having a cell phone with you and telling whoever leaving a float plan and telling people where you're headed so that we know where to look if we have to come looking for you.
So being a sailboat facility, I could go on and on about broken masts and boats flipping over and jibes, rip hardware off and all that, but I'll tell kind of a funny story, but it does involve two serious issues. Some of the kids of an owner of a shoal keel sailboat in Aries Pond decided to take it out for a party, which involved a lot of drinking, which is the serious issue. And they went out before sunset and got themselves out on the back at high tide, doing their thing. Then the tide went out, which is a big issue in Pleasant Bay and something we talk about all the time at the pond. And of course, we're grounded. Well, these guys were actually on a bachelor's party, and the wedding was the next day. So I was unaware. I generally, at that time, I was living right at the Boatyard, at the apartment above the. So I generally scan out and see what boats are out or in, and I did notice that they were still out, but I also knew that they were out having a good time. So I kind of just put it aside. Well, about 2 a.m., the knocking on the door, blue lights, police, fire rescue are all down at Aries Pond, and the parents, were upset because the wedding was the next day, and where's my son? So off we went and found these guys that were completely out of it and dragged them back in on the morning tide. But the lesson there is what what the Harbormaster started off with, this alcohol thing, is just really, really, really important. If you see, somebody, it really should report, if it looks like something that could get out of hand, because it's going to affect. It may not affect them directly, but if they're not operating the vessel properly, it could potentially hurt someone else. So, anyway, they got in, everything worked out, and they had their wedding.
She still said I do.
Yeah, over the years, we've had quite a few incidents, but one that comes to mind was I had an employee, experienced boater, probably been boating since he was a little kid, and there was one of our customers, engine broke down, so he went out to tow him in. Typically what we do, we have a little 17-foot skiff that we tow boats with, whether we're delivering them to people's moorings or what. So we went out to get him, tied him up behind him because he had to come in through by Fox Hill into Ryder's Cove, and there's a ton of wakes going by because everybody stops to like half semi-displacement, throws big wakes as you're going in because they want to see what's happening with who's getting towed and what's going on. So he did that. He got in around Fox Hill, slowed the boat down, and to come into the dock when you're in calm waters, we usually untie the boat, take them what we call on the hip, and tow alongside with them. So it's a routine he had done dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times. So he did it, and he slowed down, but the boat behind him that he was towing was quite heavy, and its momentum kept carrying it towards him. So, figuring he's experienced, he figures he's at the helm, he'll fend it off. So he just turns to fend it off like that. Well, the boat had a pulpit on it, and the pulpit came forward, and we have a side mount throttle on the workboat. The pulpit hit the throttle, and the thing just jumped, going from neutral to full speed, and he got thrown out of the boat. The other boat couldn't help him because they were broken down. Fortunately, we had there was another customer coming in. It was late afternoon, so it's like a freeway. In the morning, everybody goes out. In the afternoon, they all come back. It saw him in the water, went, grabbed him. We took him to the emergency room. He was fine. He had a few bruised ribs. Mostly his pride was hurt because he's an experienced boater. And then got the other boat in. But the point I want to make with it is, accidents happen like that, and it doesn't matter whether you're a novice or you've been doing it your whole life. Things were going smooth. There was no indication anything was going to go wrong, and then it just happened. And at that point in time, nothing you can do. I mean, he should have been wearing a life jacket. He wasn't, but fortunately, everything was okay. But you have to be careful because these things happen when you least expect them, and you have to be aware all the time of it. You probably should have bared off a little bit or untied the boat and got out of the way and then grabbed it. But I've never seen him have an accident since, or before that, but he's aware every time he goes out now and he wears a life jacket. So.
Scary stories would be involving nighttime boating for me. Usually if people are boating in the dark, it's not a good thing, especially pleasure boating. It typically involves alcohol, that kind of thing. And we had an incident a few years ago at Nauset Marine where we never really learned all the details, but we saw the result was a customer had, I think it was a 19-foot whaler he brought in on his trailer. And the thing was just absolutely destroyed. The side of the hull was ripped open, the console was gone, the railings were all gone. The outboard motor was snapped off on the transom, and the guy brought it in. He just, he said, "Kid, what can you do for this thing?" And we said, what the hell happened? And he said, I don't know. It was on my mooring. And I left it late in the afternoon, and it was fine. Next morning, this is what I found. So we don't know exactly what happened, but someone ran that boat over on its mooring that night and absolutely flattened this whaler. So, these stories, I know we could talk about many, many stories similar to this one, but again, nighttime boating, you don't know who's out there roaring around. And if you've got you've got your boat moored or anchored, or even worse, if you're out in a small boat in the dark or in a kayak or whatever, it's not a good scene. So that's my scary story, I guess. Beware of nighttime boating.
I remember that incident. It reminds me of a similar incident when a friend at Pleasant Bay was on its mooring and got hit overnight. And you have to wonder whatever happened to the other boat. I mean, it must have been horrifically damaged, but luckily, from an environmental perspective, we don't have a lot of nightmare stories associated with recreational boating so far. Most of the big damage happens in commercial boating with fuel leaks and things like that. So, but I would just say that, our nightmare is the cumulative impact, like I was saying before, of damage that happens very slowly. Death by 1,000 cuts. And each of those cuts is normally inflicted by somebody who doesn't know or doesn't care. And so a little bit of awareness is all that's really needed. I keep hearing this similar theme. People need to be aware of what they're doing. And I wonder whether, how we make that happen. We'll have to see. Anyway, I'm sure Tom will have lots of stories.
Oh my God.
One story, Tom.
Yeah, I hear you.
Pick the best.
I hear you, but short. A couple brief ones, just two. Kind of mine. One, and because we haven't talked about bow riding, but my fellow harbor masters down there are I'm sure are hear about or notice this all the time. People hanging up on the bow pulpit as the boat's going along lickety-split. Some of them very large vessels even. And when that boat slows down, the operator slows the boat down. The people up forward, they're not always aware what's going to happen to them or next. Inertia can throw them out if they're not holding tight to the bow pulpit. Off they go. Well, we did have an incident at Herring River where a boat was coming in lickety-split into the mouth of the entrance of Herring River. John, this is years and years ago. The guy was up on his buddy's driving. They had some drinks in them. The other fellow's up forward. They've been fishing. They're coming in. He slows the boat down. It's a small boat, like an 18-footer. Of course, the boat settles at the bow with this adult man on the bow. Goes down. He slides off the bow. His buddy runs over him. He's dead. Boom, like that. Okay. We had a girl in Harwich swimming off a Bank Street beach, very shallow area, very, very shallow, okay? And this was the impetus for us to start putting the swimming area buoys out off of Harwich, which have been there for years and years. John still continues to do that. But the reason we started it, we had a little girl that was had a prop cut up her back from a Mako outboard motorboat. It was running between Winchmere Harbor and Allen Harbor, close to shore, through basically where the bathers are. And the dad saw the boat coming. Here's his little daughter. They said, "Get down." All they could do was to hold their breath and go to the bottom. And the outboard skidded over this girl's back and put a prop cut up her back. Right? It's a horrible situation. Right? And we started doing that. We said we got to do something with it. That's where we started with swimming buoys. And I think we were one of the first towns to start doing that. Right now everybody's doing it. So these things happen, but I have a lot of them. But one funny one happened to me. I get a call from a sailor from Round Cove. It's really late in the year. It's after Columbus Day. It's a northeaster, and he can't use the boat ramp at Round Cove because Round Cove boat ramp is an intermittent boat ramp at that period. Now it's spectacular. It's like if you build it, they will come, right, John? So anyhow, excuse me. So he's like, I got to take my boat. I'll go over to Ryder's Cove, and I'll use the ramp at Ryder's Cove, right? It's a 22-foot O'Day sailboat. You're probably familiar with that size, right? That kind of boat. Well, a little bit high-sided. Big, tall fella. He's like 6'3". Okay. I get a call. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning. It's blowing out of the northeast. It's crummy. It's crappy. He is over. You see where Fox Hill is there. You see that sandbar on the chart up there, and he is standing there. He's aground. He somehow got stuck on that sandbar. It was low tide when he decided to come around. He's trying to make the entrance of Ryder's Cove, and he's stuck there. So he decides to climb out of his boat, big tall fella, and he's trying to push you off the sandbar. Strong. Well, that's not working. Now he can't get, he's starting to get cold. He's in the drink. It's after Columbus Day. Can't get back into the boat, right? But he can reach in and get his sailboat, and the boat's starting to move off the set, and he's the human anchor trying to hold the boat on the sandbar where he's standing, because if he lets go, he's out there in the middle of the bay, standing this deep, and no one's going to find him, right? But he reaches into his pocket and he gets his cell phone, and he somehow dials me, because I'm in his list of people to call, right? So I get a phone call at my house up on Pleasant Bay Road. Hey, I don't want to say his name, but it's me. Hey, how are you? I'm out here. Where? He describes this. Where? I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, well, I don't have a boat over there. You know, at this point, I had my sailboat, but I didn't have a motorboat that I could get to. And I'm like, brain's thinking. That's why I said, I'll go to Ryder's Cove. I'll find Alan Cohen. I don't know if Alan remembers this.
Yeah.
So I come running to Alan's office. I said, Alan, I need a motorboat right now, right? And here are the keys to the catamaran motorboat you had. You had this neat little boat, right? And I grabbed your boat and whisked out there, and sure enough, here's this guy standing here looking up he's holding the gunnel. He's looking up at the boat. We drag him out of the water and drag him back in and tow him in. But it was, these things can get out of hand. Like when you think this is going to go, and it goes south, and I can keep talking about that kind of stuff. But anyhow, that was.
Very good. I just want to highlight a few things. One, I shouldn't have it the first time, but life jackets are so critical. In a junior program and the sailing program, kids wear them. Everyone, you don't go out in the dock without a life jacket on. I grew up sailing from, I don't know, age 8 on. I always had a life jacket on, so I feel naked out there if I don't. If I'm on a kayak, if I'm on a paddleboard, I just have a life jacket on. It'll save your life. If you're in the water, if you try and keep yourself afloat, you only have so much time before you're going to be able to keep that up before you're exhausted, and then you're in real trouble. But life jacket, you just keep it on and enjoy. Having a sober driver is, if you are going to have alcohol out there, you shouldn't think of it any different than you think of the car. You want to have someone sober who can operate a boat and get everyone else back, even if everyone else is not, but someone ought to be sober. The getting thrown out of the boat, nowadays on a motorboat, they all have that kill switch, right? With the lanyard. And
there's a new law that you're required to have them.
Yeah. But that's a habit that a lot of old boaters don't have. What do I mean? I go and drive my boat. Like, you snap the seam, you have a little snap you put on your belt loop or put around your wrist, and then it takes no time for you to get thrown out of the boat. Someone hits the accelerator switch, you're out of the boat.
I just want to mention, it's a law that you have to be wearing it if you go in an under 26-foot boat at planing speed. So a lot of vendors are coming out with wireless switches now.
Oh, okay.
So that, because if you're in displacement mode, you're just maneuvering around the dock or trolling or whatever, you don't have to wear it. But above plane you do. And a lot of people don't, because it restricts your movement. But now there's quite a few manufacturers coming out with ones that you can connect that are wireless. That actually, and I was looking at one yesterday, getting ready for this. This one company has one that can have not just the operator of the boat tied in, but all the passengers too. They can all wear the wireless device, and if anybody goes overboard.
So the moment anyone's 10 feet from the boat, it just kills the engine. Yeah, those are hugely important, because those incidents happen where people get tossed from boats. All right, so at this point I'd like to open to the floor to any questions you have of any of these experts, or any stories you yourself want to tell. Al?
Just a quick one. You mentioned the inflatable life jackets, and what's the life expectancy of those things? I couldn't find it anywhere.
Toss that one down. To...
So in the like a regular life jacket, people have to inspect those. One of the life expectancy indications are the automatic inflatable ones. Some of them have pills in them, and those pills have dates on them and have to be replaced over a number of years. So, but the manual ones it's like the older ones. You just give a self-inspection. You check the threads, you check the seams, you check the manual inflator to make sure everything works, and you can literally Velcro it back together.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, good morning. I appreciate all of you contributing to it. I understand that the sort of the focus of the conversation is sailboat versus powerboat, but there are plenty of us that swim in water, especially town Cove, and my wife and I swim a good part of Pleasant Bay. And I wonder if in your discussions about boater safety, whether or not you chat with your boat operators and sailboat operators about their requirements in terms of staying away from swimmers and even clammers in the Cove area where it's fairly shallow. There are a lot of clammers throughout the year. And I was a little surprised in my perusal of the environmental police boat safety that there was one provision that said it might be reckless or negligent operation to swim near areas of swimmers, which to me really wasn't specific enough. So that a little bit.
We're just reviewing this week in the department, so I'll speak to it. So in the CMRs, it's a little bit more descriptive than these booklets that you get from the environmental police. But any area, any shoreline that can be used for swimming, that's kind of a key phrase, can be used for swimming. You have to stay 150 feet with your boat, your power boat, away from that swimmer. So, for instance, let's take the south-facing beaches that are marked in Harwich and Chatham. And Oyster Pond. Oyster Pond's a good one because there's literally strings of buoys, and there's a difference there. So when you mark, we mark those beaches generally out to 150 feet at least, because that's the no operation zone. You can't operate a boat. And then from 150 feet to 300 feet, it's headway speed, and that's throughout the state. So I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but that gives you some parameters. If there's a string of buoys, if it's a marked area like we see in Oyster Pond and other places, then it's 75 feet. So just a couple of numbers to throw out to be thinking about.
The problem with us as swimmers is I'm not fast enough to catch the power boats.
Yeah.
And let them go. And frankly, maybe you probably know, the issue tends to be more like Cape Cod Bay, Skagen, places like that. And sometimes jet skis, but the jet skis, my experience with jet skis is primarily around the 4th of July. That sort of we seem to bring the outsiders that are less cognizant of swimmers, stand-up paddleboarders.
Sure, anytime you have low profile to the water, it's difficult for for boaters to see you. Swimmers, kayakers, like I talked about before, you can't rely on the boaters to be up to speed with the regulations necessarily, right? My recommendation would be to play it safe. The most knowledgeable of boaters may have a hard time spotting a swimmer if there's any textured conditions on the water. So understanding that designated swim areas are a little different, but areas where people may swim off the shoreline, that gets a little vague. And that's pretty broad as far as I'm concerned. So I would just heed a warning to swimmers that, you know, if you know what you're getting yourself into, if there's power boaters in the area. That's the best I can do for you.
Do you guys use floats when you're out swimming?
Well,
If you're offshore?
I know you're gonna say we should. You have to understand, we swim almost every day, including through the winter. Our biggest concern historically has been the Great Lakes in terms of we have camouflage, wetsuits, and all that sort of stuff. We're pretty good swimmers, but I understand sort of the visual in terms of we're pretty smart by staying close to shore and understanding the environment we're in. We have quite colored outfits, so to speak. But no, you're right. The yellow little buoys that.
It's especially if you're, I mean, if you're just swimming along the shore. I think all the rules boaters should be expected to be aware of, and be able to spot swimmers along the shore. When someone's swimming like across the bay, occasionally someone decides it's a good challenge to swim across the bay. That's a real hazard. And so a float, not so much that necessarily that you're going to need it, that you can't swim across the bay, but it creates a visual. I'm sorry, Nate.
Just to put it in perspective, I was on a 19-foot Boston whaler in Cape Cod Bay, off-duty recreational fishing, off of Dennis. We looked up and there was a powerboat steaming right at us. We were dead in the water, motor off. By the time we could even react to get to the ignition, this boat was upon us, and we had to dive off the boat both directions, and the Boston whaler was completely overcome by the other vessel. The other vessel, no one was behind the wheel, and the wheel of the boat that we were on was absolutely destroyed. So just putting things in perspective of what can happen on the water and visibility, and how, who's paying attention and who isn't. You gotta, I think it's a situational awareness situation that you mentioned before. Yeah.
I would just, on that comment about the swimming, solar glare has a lot of issue too. We had a swimmer in Long Pond who was killed. He was an MIT swimmer. I don't remember that story. But if I recall, that was kind of very late in the day, and so the sun is down here. The boater's coming into the sunlight, into the glare of the sun, and didn't and this guy actually had a habit of swimming out away from the shore in Long Pond. Long Pond's a big place, well away from the immediate beach, right? And so he'd have a nice clean lane. He wouldn't have to worry about, swimming. Your head's down. Am I going to swim into a boat or a mooring? You want to be outside a little bit. That's where he was. And then, of course, this boat's coming along shore, and that solar thing is happening. And cars have accidents because of solar glare too. I can, I know every time I go up Pleasant Bay Road late in the evening, the light is coming right, and I'm going getting the visor down so that's a thought too.
Sarah, good thing.
So to follow up on Stewie's comment earlier, they used to be called coffins, the 14-foot, 12-foot kayak that polyethylene, and they had no inflation inside, so that kayak came up with inflatable bags that you could put astern, but if you could just the foam that you use for your rafts out on the water, it's those blue foams, stick it in the bow, stick it in the stern, gives you that moment of being able to have enough buoyancy to get you on the top and get your wear for all, because they will fill up like a bathtub, and no one, no matter what you are, will be able to turn that boat over and get you on your way. In the turn of 2000, when we started the Paddle Smart from the start program, there was far more education than there is today on paddleboard, on any paddle sport. And one of the things that we were doing back then is the suction cup on the stern end of your kayak going through mooring fields was in Nantucket, in Martha's Vineyard, they were having problems with kayakers sneaking through mooring fields, and here you have these 30-foot sailboats. with big gunnels, and you couldn't see the kayak coming out as people were moving through the mooring fields. Same thing happens that it then ended up going out the Main Island Trail. Most of those courtesy kayakers out there were all having these, they're very thin, they're like like we put on a bike, giving you some visibility so that if you had your boat in a marsh and you went for a walk, that flag would be there and hopefully give you a little more sight from that, as Nate said, sea level. So we just have lost a lot of that paddle smart from the start. I mean, Tom Leach was the leader in the life jacket build of 2004, and that darn thing, Stewie hit it. One guy in the North Shore didn't know how to use a compass. So let's just put a whistle on your kayak, on your life jacket. That's simple. You don't need the darn compass. You just want to keep yourself, and that's still got job. So a lot of history to all of this today.
Stu?
Well, just to follow up, it was interesting about the Nantucket experience, but one thing to keep in mind is, communities can either collectively or individually pass bylaws and ordinances as it relates to boating operation. Now, there's a process to that. Your local community has to accept it, and a town meeting would have to vote for it, being the legislature, and then the Attorney General and the environmental police have to approve it. But there is a process for that. So if communities, might be an interesting discussion if there's safety issues that are born out of this discussion. Maybe Pleasant Bay could be a starting point on some of these thoughts to require some really, I would say, inexpensive and basic safety equipment. Thanks.
Yeah, that's interesting.
By way of bylaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially because we represent, we're at the intersection of 4 towns. So we have an opportunity to get not just a town, but a region involved. So if something like the bill that the legislature never passed, whether we put that into bylaw form and present it to the towns.
The best example of that was we legislated out jet skis from Pleasant Bay and certain parts of Monomoy, right? And that was a town effort.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
3 towns collectively using their bylaw power.
That's right.
Yeah, excellent. So next one.
Hi, my name is Bill Terrell. I've been, my wife and I own a 18-foot sailboat, and I've been boating on Little Pleasant Bay and Big Pleasant Bay for about 7 years. And I think the thing that makes us fear for our safety the most is the congested areas where we transit, primarily the Narrows and the river. And, seeing a couple close calls up there, and, you see things that are happening more when the Harbormaster, particularly Nate's Harbormaster boat, is not out there. There's less courtesy and less higher speed and less awareness of the rules of the road than when the boat is not out there. Or sorry, when the boat is out there, there's more awareness. I'm just wondering from Nate and perhaps the other Harbormasters whether they feel that they have enough resources out there, particularly in the last few years when there's more new boats and more inexperienced boaters on the water
Boats are
to
faster.
sort of help the situation. And before I end, I want to just give one anecdotal story. I had a friend that was participating in the yearly cat gathering that Tony presents, and he has a fairly small home-built scurry boat, and they were, sort of at the back of the line. They were way behind the other boats going through. They were coming back through the Narrows. They'd gone through the Narrows. They're on the north side of Simpson Island. A powerboat went through, not really close to them, but enough to swamp their boat. So they swamped the entire boat. They had to sort of drag it up on Simpson Island. They lost a lot of gear in the process. The powerboat didn't stop to offer assistance, just sort of kept going. So I just wonder if there's any more that can be done to sort of facilitate the safe transit of some of those congested areas. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to build on that, and because this came up earlier from Tony, and I also think of the area outside Ryder's Cove, and that is the expansion of no-wake areas. Are there areas that you guys as Harbormasters would support expanding the no-wake? I think particularly by Ryder's Cove, that turn right by Fox Hill, where it's gotten real shallow in recent years.
It has, you're right, and there's two at least in Chatham, I'm not familiar with the other communities' bylaws, but in our bylaw, we can expand the no-wake zones by a vote of the Board of Selectmen and a recommendation from the Waterways Committee. There's another provision in state law under the CMR that allows harbormasters to expand the wake zone on their own. So there's two ways to do that. A lot of those no wake zones are very hotly debated, shall we say. So it's important to get, political buy-in and have some discussions about that. We have instituted no wake zones in that area. We didn't when we started dredging in that area. We hoped it would improve, but we may have to revisit that area as well. Going back to the staffing levels, your question, we in Chatham, we run a patrol boat on two sides of town, on the south side in Stage Harbor, and on the east side in Chatham Harbor. And they run, generally from June through September, 7 days a week, and they're running until, frequently 8 o'clock at night, starting at 8 in the morning. So we augment that with a third boat. If we have nice weather on the weekends, we get a lot more boating traffic, and we do put a third boat underway on the east side as well. Some of that is due, obviously, to the increase in boating traffic and conflicts between swimmers and beachgoers and boaters. But a lot of it is a lot of the increase that we're seeing in our staffing levels and the expansion in the time of year. It used to be, okay, we were underway July and August with the patrol boats. For goodness sakes, now it's getting further into the shoulder season because people are using their boats more and more, probably because they're buying 4 engines and putting them on it. We got to use them. Big investment there. And lastly, the other reason is the change in operational status of the Coast Guard Station Chatham. You probably read about it in the paper, that Station Chatham was a surf station. The Coast Guard downgraded that to a heavy weather station, and then, and I'll just note, within 18 months of each other, they made those two changes, and then downgraded it from a non-heavy weather station. So now it's not even a heavy weather station. We're in a, somewhat polite debate with the Coast Guard on that issue, but it doesn't look like that is going to change. And if it does, it certainly isn't going to change anytime soon, which is kind of getting back to your question on, presence on the water. Thanks.
Nate, Nate, you want to address the issue of the river?
Sure.
Whether that might be expanded?
Well, I can guarantee you one thing, just you haven't addressed, the adjustments to no wakes in the past, that I would be able to fill the room probably similarly, if not more, than we have here today if we start talking about the adjustments to no wakes.
I'm sure.
You need to, there's due process.
Yeah.
You want to represent the different user groups. Like I mentioned before, it's that convergence of different users in small water bodies that is the challenge of managing places like Pleasant Bay. There are boats that are headed long distances and using Pleasant Bay to transit. And this is only a small fraction of their journey, right? So those folks certainly are going to argue the fact that they're trying to expedite the process. And then there's the folks that are recreating within the estuary. They're going to argue the fact that there are certain locations that should be expanded for no wake. So in the town of Orleans, we have a Waterways Committee, Shellfish and Waterways Committee. Anytime that anybody has recommendations for expansion or adjustment or addition of no wake zones, we recommend that they bring that forward to the committee so that we can have that process. I don't have the ability just to add a no wake myself, and if I was going to bring it to the select board, I would want them to know that we had gone through that process. Yeah. To speak on having enough resources dedicated to enforcement, it's a challenge, right? You can only be so many places at once. We manage 3 water bodies: Pleasant Bay, Nauset Estuary, Cape Cod Bay. We have a boat on the Nauset side. We have a boat on the Pleasant Bay side. We have boat patrol officers dedicated to both those vessels, and we share the responsibility of managing Cape Cod Bay with the town of Eastham. If you park the boat at the Narrows, which you can make an argument on a busy day would be appropriate, and set up shop there for the day, I could solve the problem of people not observing the no wake. But just around the corner, inside the river, everybody would be speeding as they got me in the rearview mirror. You know, this is what we witness. The other delicate part of this is that if I dedicate too much staff to one specific location or one specific water body, we're also on call 24 hours a day for search and rescue, and we need to be available and try to minimize the time it takes to get to a certain location. So it's a balancing act, right? I think there's no question that the key to safety is enforcement and education, right? And a presence goes a long way. I mean, you look at the creative ways that the police handle a presence on the roadways now, right? They'll park cars that have no one in them along the side of the road, just so it appears that there's a presence of police officers. We are always monitoring these conditions, and we are aware that at 5 a.m. when all the boats go offshore fishing, and there's no likelihood that there's a harbormaster watching the no wake, that very few of those boats are probably abiding by the no wake signs. But you know, we can only be, like I said, we can only be so many places at once.
Could I just follow up on what you're saying, Nate? With the river, everybody understands the river going up in the Meeting House Pond. I think from what Nauset Marine does is educating their customers about what goes on and making that turn into Little Bay. I suspect most of those customers are courteous and watch their wake. But unfortunately, we don't have we only have just one public ramp in Orleans. Imagine if there were 3 or 4. So my question to Nate or to the Friends of Pleasant Bay is maybe on those busy days at the town, at that public ramp, that these people are putting their power boats in and heading out to go fishing, and like Nate was just saying, they only have one thing on their mind, and that's to get to the fish. And so they just fly off their trailer and with just fish on their mind, just swamping every little boat and kayak as they head out. That maybe these people who are using a ramp are made aware of what's going on, making that turn and at the Narrows, that they have to be wary of this. So just reiterating the education, but there is some general public that are using the bay that, like I said, just have one thing on their mind: beach or fish, and they're oblivious to whatever's in front of them. So I think maybe that's a possibility, or maybe you do it.
I will say that we represent the people. We want input from the folks, and there's a process. So if there's certain adjustments that you'd like to see with waterways bylaws in the town of Orleans or any town, bring them forward, and we'll recommend the proper course of action to get that done, or at least get you involved in the discussion of the appropriate way to accomplish those goals. Like I mentioned before, we can't be everywhere at once. I'm sure that people are witnessing things that we might not be, or have recommendations that we might not have thought of. Bring them forward, please. This is what we do. We work for you guys.
Great.
I have a concern, and I'm not sure it's a problem yet, but I think it might end up being one, and that is wakeboarding. I haven't really seen any wakeboarding in Pleasant Bay, in the Big Bay. That's where I have my mooring. But I also read all the boating magazines, and it's really a popular sport. And I'm wondering whether anybody has thought about the impact of wakeboarding. Certainly, it's a negative, would be a negative impact on smaller boats and kayaks for sure, and also the shoreline. So the videos I've seen of boats that are set up for wakeboarding, they're tremendous wake that they produce. And I wonder if there's any concern about that in Pleasant Bay, and I'm really just talking about Pleasant Bay.
I appreciate the concern. Certainly the idea behind a wakeboard is to enhance the size of the wake so that it's as big as the wake as possible, similar to a wave. Generally speaking, I see those kind of vessels that people invest a lot of money into on freshwater bodies. Until it's a problem, I haven't witnessed that. I mean, clearly it's because they're trying to modify the vessel to increase the size of the wake. That's a difference from, say, tubing or water skiing. But to date, we haven't witnessed the problem with influx of those vessels coming in the bay. So until that point, I don't think it necessarily needs to be addressed with bylaws or anything.
Neil. Oh, I'm sorry, Stuart, do you want to address that? Here, John.
When you consider regulating activities like that, it's important, I think, to look at the existing set of laws and that the state of Massachusetts has, because a lot of these things are covered. If you wanted to prohibit wakeboarding boats, let's call them, that's not covered. That would be something that you'd have to construct in a bylaw if the state accepted that. But that being said, vessels creating wake, there's a lot of restrictions on where they can't create a wake, and there's restrictions and liabilities placed upon them for any damage they cause because of the wake. So just food for thought.
Todd or Alan, have you guys seen any influx of those kind of boats?
Not at all.
Everyone just wants to go fishing.
They're not very popular around here.
Well, may it remain so. Sorry, Neil.
I just had one thought about talking about the speed and having a speed zone. Idle speed or slow speed or no wake speed or full speed. Maybe there's something in the middle in some of those areas where, you limit a boat from going, 35 or 40 knots to, 15 or 18 knots, where they're not making a big wake, but they're also not going to be approaching a boat at such a high speed. Because if somebody's going 40, or maybe there's already a speed limit that I'm not aware of, but, they come up on a boat so fast, a sailboat or something, you're not constantly looking, all of a sudden there's a boat coming at you at 40 knots. These bigger, more powerful boats that are capable of going those speeds, is there any limit?
Well, I think we'd rely on negligent op at that point, right? Reckless.
We do, but there is a speed limit on Commonwealth waters, and that's 40. So if they're doing 41, let us know. I don't know how we figure that out. Maybe Nate needs a speed gun. I'm not sure, but there is a speed limit of 40 knots on the water.
And that these guys have been in the game longer than I have. To have that in between. We have a hard enough time getting people's brains wrapped around the fact that what headway speed is compared to, non-headway speed. Never mind the fact you have, for us to gauge the speed of a vessel in whatever that would be appropriate in a distinct location like you're talking about, I'm not sure it's practical. But I would lean on these guys to.
You don't have to quit. You don't have to put your boats with a speed gun.
Not yet.
Yeah, I would just agree with Nate. That's really tough to enforce. And if you're going to put something in place, you got to be able to enforce it. And if you have an in-between speed, it could make things worse actually. If either you're going slow through the water at idle or 5 miles an hour, or you're on plane. And if you're in between that, you're going to be creating more of a wake than anything, plowing through the water. So it's really a tough thing to be able to gauge. I would say, not good practice to institute something that you can't enforce, and I think that'd be tough to do.
So that 40 mile an hour is on all Commonwealth waters. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could say it might be reasonable to say, okay, within X distance of a shoreline to make it more like 25, but
Well, we have
yeah.
those.
Well,
We have those, but there also is a a set speed limit for 40 knots. But 40 knots in that river ought to be interesting. If that's what they're doing.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Can you make the no wake buoys big?
You want to come home with us?
Because
every-
I am one of those people who go 4 to 6 knots in my catboat, and those guys that are coming back from fishing to River Road are scary, And I see them from a distance, and I tack and leave, But the wake is like a mountain.
Yeah, the buoys do come in different sizes. I know John and I buy Gilman buoys out of Gilman, Connecticut. I don't know what you. And they're foam buoys, so because people run them over, and you can see the prop marks, and speed buoys. So they do come in a variety of sizes. The larger you get, the more difficult they are to handle. So we have small davits on our boats to lift the larger of the buoys. But we have both small and large.
We have small davits too.
You're younger.
Yeah. No.
It is big enough to block the river.
That's right. Yeah, it's like narrow lanes or speed calming. Any other questions? Why don't I, we've just about filled 2 hours here. Why don't I give everyone on the panel one chance to give one last thought as we think about boating safety, and perhaps a thought about one thing we can do going forward, other than swamp our waterways committees, but some other things that maybe we could implement, or we at PBCB could help push for it. Go. Start with John.
Well, I think it's kind of already been, I think Nate said it, I think, education is key. I think these kind of forums are real helpful. I think people should look to take advantage of some of the Power Squadron, Coast Guard auxiliaries, some of those public safety courses that are out there. There's a lot of discussion and debate on whether, and there's been legislation that's been brought forward of whether we should require recreational boaters to get a boating license, to take a course and have a license in hand. I don't know what side of the fence everybody's on with that in regard to that, but I certainly am in favor of it. If you got money, you can buy a boat and not have any idea how to operate it, and I think there's risk there. And I think education certainly goes a long way. And presence is important from our world of work, being out on the water. You talked about resources, and we could always use more resources in Harwich. We're spread out. We got Pleasant Bay around Cove, we got a Long Pond, we got 3 harbors and Nantucket Sound, and it's tough to be everywhere, but presence certainly does help, and we do our best to try to get out there. If you just look at there's some stats from the 2020 boating season that the Coast Guard puts out, and we don't have 21 yet, but there was a big influx of boaters in 2020, and a lot of it they seem to think is because of the whole COVID and isolation, and everybody went out and bought boats, and the stats show that it was a 26% increase in the number of accidents from the previous year, 25% more deaths, 767 deaths last year because of boating, or involving boating. And you know, 86% of those deaths, boaters weren't wearing life jackets. So, I mean, it's a growing industry, bigger boats, faster boats, and, you know, I don't see any changes to that. And there's only so much waterway. And so our waterways, our channels, our harbors are getting saturated, and there's a lot of competing interests out there when it comes to the waterway. And so, I mean, it's education and trying to get folks to really think hard about what's required to have fun, recreate, I mean, I get it. I love boating too, but there's a responsibility that comes with that, and getting that message out is all of our jobs. So, thanks.
You'll hear a constant theme from me, and that's these small boats, these kayaks and canoes are requiring a lot of agencies' time to look for them when they're lost, and you know, it's a great sport. It's just that, and I'm not always one for more regulation. I think we have to be careful about that. But in this particular case, it's really easy. It could be a Pleasant Bay Alliance initiative with the 3-4 towns. It could be a Cape Cod, Barnstable County wide initiative. Maybe you start small and move. But you know, legislating a few small items like, you know, a whistle and a compass, and they come in the same freaking thing. You know, we have them, so it's not hard. And requiring life jackets throughout the year. And I like the flag that we heard about earlier that you put up. I mean, these are inexpensive, easy things that can go a long way. And as Nate pointed out, I'll just reiterate, please put your name and phone number on the kayaks. Thanks.
One thing we didn't mention today was stand-up paddle boards. I think it's important to note that you are required to have a life jacket or PFD with you on a stand-up paddle board. And I would say the majority of the people that we see on stand-up paddle boards do not have them. So, you know, it's a new requirement of the last maybe 3 years ago. It's incorporated. So I want to make sure that that point is broadcasted loudly, because they're just as dangerous as any of these other vessels, if not more dangerous. The only time you shouldn't have a PFD with you is if you're surfing in the open ocean on one of these things. What I'm going to end with is use us as a resource, please. We never mind getting a call from someone saying, family's coming into town. We were thinking about going out to Nauset Inlet, spend the day at the beach. This is the day we're thinking about going. This is the boat we have. Can you give us any guidance? Or if someone's saying, we're thinking about buying a boat. This is where we live. We have the eligibility for a mooring out in front of the property. And giving them advice on what size vessel, what type of vessel, after listening to what their needs are and what their goals are for, you know, using the boat. And generally, I try to downsize their thoughts, because, you know, people start out with, well, it's going to be a 30-foot boat, and, you know, but we're never going to plan on going in the ocean, and, you know, it's 300 horsepower, twins, and I think a lot of times people have much bigger vessels than they need for what their actual skill set is. Before you leave, please, I have a business card, I have contact information. We have really good educational information that we can hand out to you or email to you. If anybody has a way of handing that stuff out to the public, it involves paddling etiquette, like I said, boating basics, which kind of dumbs down all the regulations into really short list of, you know, key points. We have that stuff, so take advantage of us. Thanks.
Just to reiterate that, so you're required to have life jackets equal to the number of people on any vessel that you are on, from a stand-up paddleboard to cruise ship. Right. They're not currently required to wear them under all those circumstances, but they're required to have them on board, and that applies to kayaks and paddleboards.
Thank you, yeah, yes.
Tony?
Yeah, well, I think I'll just follow up with what's already been said by the Harbormasters. And ask, friends of Pleasant Bay and PBCB to do more of these. I'm sorry if I'm being ignorant here, but, I do think the town ramps are part of the problem. And I don't know whether there are handouts there or whatnot. This would be for all the towns, and again, I apologize if that's already being done. I think a lot of the people that live on Pleasant Bay and use Pleasant Bay and work out of the boatyards are aware of the problems. It's the public coming in from wherever that are creating some situations and to they may not know. So we need to educate them, and I think starting with seminars like this is a great way to go, and I think Friends of Pleasant Bay is the conduit to get out there and then work with the towns with the bylaws and whatnot.
Yeah, if we maybe had a pamphlet design, I don't know if one exists yet, but that would be in one of those, resource and map guide, but one that's specifically designed to put in
the
takeaway ones
the
at public
safety
ramps.
It just address the safety thing.
Yeah, that really highlights safety issues and no wake zones and those things. So, well-meaning people from outside could be educated too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, we can all, no matter how much time you spent on the water, we can all learn something new. It happens every day out there. I would say, whether we've been boating for 40, 50 years or we're a novice, we should still try to keep up with the latest. I agree with John, and I think it should be a law passed to require licensing or some type of boating safety certificate for all operators. I know it's been fought hard by the Marine Trades Associations, because they're afraid it will restrict boat sales. But I'd much rather have less people in the water that know what they're doing than everybody out there that's just a free fall. People buy a boat and they think it's like operating a car, and it's not. We've had new boaters.
There's no break there.
Yeah, we've had new boaters that they come in, every time they go out, we have to rescue them till we can teach them enough how to get where they need to go, how to not run aground.
I'll just start by responding to one thing Alan mentioned was the legislation to make a mandatory boating license, and I am involved with the Massachusetts Marine Trades Association. I'm on the board of directors, and the MMTA does support having that license.
You can see an MMA.
Yeah, you may be right. Yeah, the Massachusetts Marine Trades is in support of having a mandatory license, and the way I understood it was that the legislation has been before the folks at the State House for 3 or 4 years now. Apparently the guy that's been pushing it, I'm not sure which senator or whoever it was, is no longer, and it's lost its momentum, so it needs somebody to drive it home again. I don't know who can pick up that ball, but a legislator needs to pick that up and really try to push it forward. Secondly, as far as boating safety here, I think it's not even so much education as it is an understanding of the different groups of boaters we have. I know Nate touched upon this, and it's something I wanted to mention. He got to it first, but with all the different boaters out there, and I'll just use our customers at our marina, we have those boaters who, and these would just be power boaters, that like to take slow rides around Pleasant Bay. We have boaters that might want to try to get out to the beach. We have boaters that might want to go out there on a water ski. And then we certainly have a class of boaters who just go from A to B, as Nate said, down the highway. They have no intention of Pleasant Bay with the exception of using it to get from our marina to the ocean to go fishing. And anytime their boat leaves the dock, that's what they do. They go immediately to the inlet. So you have all these different people doing different, or using the bay for different reasons. And maybe to the point of the pamphlet, if a pamphlet was to be created, with further information, certainly include something about those different uses of the bay, I guess I'll call it, and how people use the bay differently. Because some people don't realize when they're out for a nice, quiet, slow drive that the other guy's just trying to get there. It's certainly an issue.
Well, I think everybody's saying in different words many of the same concepts about increasing awareness, call it education, call it information. A lot of that is the foundation of the solution here. Two problems with it. One is disseminating it and getting it to the hands of people who need it. I feel, once again, we're sort of preaching to the choir here today because everybody here is here because they understand these issues. How do we get it into the hands? Maybe disseminate it, getting it onto ramps, launching points, things like that. But then the other issue is getting people to actually read it and absorb it. And there are always going to be people who feel entitled to ignore information. And so that brings you back into maybe, I am a bigger fan of regulation than Stuart is, because I don't have the faith in human nature that they're going to actually do what needs to be done unless you actually require it. I don't see the difference in power boating and driving a car necessarily. And you said something like 700 and something deaths last year in Massachusetts waters from boating. There were only 415 motor vehicle deaths in the state. And I might suggest that's because there's...
That was a national.
That was a
That was
national.
national? Okay, never mind. But still, I think that if you're going to license an activity that is inherently dangerous and poses a risk to lives and to resources and to everything, a minimum requirement of understanding and showing that you're proficient is not too much to ask. And if the state legislature can't do it, maybe we try to figure out a way to do it locally.
Yeah, at PBCB, we actually did have our boating safety class that would emanate from there. And our last official class was not this past year, the year before, okay? Steve Smith spearheaded it with Dave Vincent. And we'd like to bring that back. Last year was just undoable because of the COVID regulations and because of basically when we contacted the Division of Motorboats that we have to get our certification through. They basically were completely shut down because of the COVID situation. So hopefully that'll be remedied now that things are improving, and maybe we'll be able to bring that back to our campus. I think that would do a lot. But just sitting here, I was thinking about one thing that, take a page from Nate Sears' book, that really, as an Outer Beach guy driving that Outer Beach, that Nate makes us watch a video every year to get our beach pass, right? To run our 4-wheel drive down the Outer Beach. It's if you've never seen it, it is excellent. And it brings in all the elements of what they are looking for us to do to operate our 4-wheel drive on the Outer Beach safely, and not to injure the dunes, and watch out for the piping plovers. And this is why we're shut down. And I saw Dick here, he's back there. And so that kind of a video, with the help of the marina operators, if we could all kind of work together, some kind of something that we could put on a web, at a YouTube, that get it out there. Boaters have to look at it, even if they might choose to look at it. Hey, this is interesting. It's got a lot of scenery of Pleasant Bay, I think that would be something that we could all work towards. I don't want to be the guy doing it. But maybe there's somebody out there that would be like, yeah, I have some skills. I can help pull that together. But I think that might be something that Pleasant Bay Community Boating can kind of nurture,
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank everyone. I want to close, before we give everyone one last Thank you. Speaking of education, I was calling this like Safety at Sea, a course book from U.S. Sailing, which is required for offshore races that have some that's certified on this. But there's a couple of nice things I wanted to just read quickly. It's not enough to ensure adequate gear is on board. You must have knowledge and experience to make crucial decisions in times of crisis. How do you decide when it's time to reef to avoid dangerous waves or lee shores? How do you know when to call for help? That's another key thing. When is the point that's the right to call for help? Some people feel like, well, I don't want to bother anyone, and they get themselves in worse and worse trouble. But as it ends, classrooms and books are just the beginning. Voyaging with experienced sailors is the only way to become fully competent. So go sailing, respect the sea, enjoy the challenge, and come back and share your knowledge with others. Boating is what makes our part of the Cape, or the Cape, really special. And so I think it's great that we spend a little time thinking about the safe aspect of how we do what we do. So I wanted to say one last thank you to all of our panelists, and give them a round of applause. And I'm sure they'll all answer any further questions. And there we go, just over 2 hours. Almost kept it to the right point. Thank you all.